Hi there, I'm Kim Middleton. I'm an academic director at the Association of College and University Educators, or ACUE, as you'll hear us call it. And I'm so pleased to welcome you to this virtual fireside chat today. At ACUE, we believe that meaningful, effective learning is absolutely possible for all students, and that great teaching is what makes a difference. We work with colleges, universities, and now systems to implement evidence-based teaching practices and deepen faculty learning. I have the enviable job of working with our partner institutions and faculty throughout their ACUE experience. We know that the theme of AAC&U this year is revolutionizing higher ed after COVID-19. So today our conversation will focus on the importance of creating a culture of great teaching in that revolution. And you'll hear how Santa Clara University built their own community of evidence-based teaching and grew it over the course of the pandemic. I'm really, truly thrilled to be speaking with Eileen Elrod and Christelle Sabatier today. I've had the great pleasure of working with them since 2019 and have had the opportunity and a front row seat to see how their institutional values inform their innovation and their community building. And I'm so excited for them to share their story today. So to kick that off, I'd like to ask each of them to introduce themselves, maybe share a little bit about their role at Santa Clara University and the background of the institution. So we'll start with Eileen.
Okay, thanks, Kim. So let me just tell you, Santa Clara University is a Jesuit institution, private school in the San Francisco Bay Area. We consider ourselves a school that emphasizes teaching and research equally. We're engaged with Silicon Valley, and Christelle and I will tell you that we think our teaching culture has been shifting in the last few years, and that's part of what we want to talk about today. I've been at Santa Clara almost my entire professional life. So I've been there 28 years. I'm in my heart and by training, professor of English, studying early American and 19th century American literature. But for 10 years, I have been serving as associate provost for faculty development and have been engaged with faculty, working to improve their teaching and working to continue their career trajectory. And so those questions make my heart go pitter patter. All of those questions energize me and excite me.
Thanks, Eileen. Christelle?
Thanks. I've been at Santa Clara for 15 years. I've been teaching primarily in the biology department and more recently in our new neuroscience program. And I've had the pleasure to be involved with Eileen's office for a number of years. One of my passions is to be bringing evidence-based practices into the classroom to help better support our students and improve our inclusive pedagogies, and connecting with all of the amazing teaching across Santa Clara has been really key to that. And I've been involved with ACUE for almost 3 years now. So we started in 2018 with these year-long experiences with small groups of faculty. And as I'm sure we'll talk about a lot more, that ballooned this summer as we really recognize the value that ACUE could bring our community in this moment to help us meet the demands of this moment.
Thank you, Christelle. I feel like I couldn't ask for a better frame than that, right? So we have a sense of Santa Clara and what each of you do and the amount of time that you've been there, right? Like deeply infused into this culture building. So I want to jump in and maybe start with the big why, right? Why is it that we cultivate a culture around effective teaching to begin with, just so that people get situated in terms of your story?
It's a really important question to us at Santa Clara. And again, we're in a real time of transition, I think. So let me start by saying structurally, so I'm going to answer sort of smaller and get bigger, I guess. Structurally, we emphasize teaching and research, as I mentioned. We don't have a teaching center. But in 2012 or so, I think, we started a pilot program that was all about crossing over silos and collaborating with faculty and staff across the university to support innovative and evidence-based teaching. Christelle has been involved with that effort since the very beginning. And as she mentioned, a few years ago, we very happily began to partner with ACUE in order to accomplish that purpose. And actually, Christelle and I discovered ACUE at about the same time. And I remember this conversation we had in front of the mission, like, have you heard of this? And I just heard about this, and shouldn't we? Let's get to know these folks. And it's been a really rich and wonderful relationship that has really supported our changing culture around teaching. So it's important to note, I mentioned that we're a private Jesuit institution in the Bay Area. And so answering the why about supporting effective teaching and how to cultivate a culture around effective teaching, why do we work so hard at this? And we have been working really hard at it, even pre-COVID. And as we all know, post-COVID or mid-COVID, it's become ridiculous, and that's just how it is. But because we are a Jesuit institution, we have a particular value on providing our students with a rich and connected education, with an education that addresses questions of identity, that includes practices of reflection, that urges them to connect to the world outside of Santa Clara and the world outside of their classrooms, and an education that inspires them not only to connect to the world, but to make an impact on it. And now we know that most of those things, which some of us think of as Jesuit pedagogy, some of us think of as feminist pedagogy, is actually all good teaching. And I don't know that we, those of us in higher ed, I don't know that we knew that as clearly as we know it now. But it is a deep part of our value as Jesuit educators to teach in ways that includes, reflection, action, evaluation, and a connection to the world beyond. And really teaching that acknowledges the students' context, students as full humans. We want to teach as full humans. We want to teach. We want to connect with our students as full humans, and we do all of that and work so hard on all of that because it's really the reason we exist. And if all of higher education didn't know the value of teaching pre-COVID, boy, did we discover it. I mean, I think lots of us knew it before, that the whole reason we're in business is our wonderful students and our commitment to them, really our promise to them to provide them with a transformative experience in university. And if those parts of higher ed that didn't know that, I think, discovered that. And we've had funny conversations this year about, oh, everybody knows now. Turns out we're here for the students. Lots of us have known that all along. I think anybody who wasn't in touch with that reality got in touch with it really fast, round about March. So that's, various answers to why we work so hard at teaching the students.
And I think I would add to that the way I sort of got into this idea that I had to learn more about strategies for teaching, right? That wasn't something I was trained to do coming into the classroom, was the realization, right, that there's how you were taught, and then there's best practices for teaching, and those don't always mesh. And that when you start to deploy those best practices, what happens to your students and their ability to sort of go beyond what you had ever anticipated is just incredible and feeds on itself, right? And so for me, years ago, that was the pivot that sort of hooked me into really thinking deeply about teaching. And then there's, connecting within the community at Santa Clara already existing that we're thinking about that was huge, right? To sort of be like, let's look at this from different perspectives. Let's not assume that STEM teaching is one way and humanities teaching is a different way. Like, we can share with each other. And that's where, the work of faculty development at Santa Clara has really brought these ideas together. And then, we arrive at March and this, like, it's all everybody in, let's all share what we got. Let's, nobody reinvent the wheel, because not only were our students struggling, but we were now being placed in somewhere where we'd never experienced before, right? So we couldn't go to our trusted, like, this is how I was taught, and this is how I've been teaching for decades. That toolbox, right? We needed more tools to fill in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was just to piggyback on that further. That was the great thing about COVID, that we were all put in the position of learners. And that, as you said, Christelle, we couldn't rely on what we used to do or what we had observed. And, that's the great, not tragic flaw, but flaw in higher ed, is that there isn't systematic training for us as we become faculty members. It's based on this kind of age-old assumption that if we see it, we know how to do it. And, we know now that's not true. We know there's a gigantic body of research about how students learn and how teachers can teach effectively. And, oh, wait a minute, it's not just about personal style or charisma or teaching from your gut. That's all nice stuff sometimes. And sometimes, as we know, it's disastrous. And that we really do need to rely on what's proven, that as critical thinkers, as folks committed to higher education, we need to know the research, and we know that in our fields. And I think now more and more of us are learning that that's true, not just in our fields, but that's true when we step into the classroom. We should be drawing on what is known, what is currently understood, and what's continuing to be researched and proven and demonstrated.
One of the things I always appreciate about listening to the two of you is the ways that you're thinking about this community and your values at multiple levels. That it is the institution, that it is your faculty, what they come to you with, and where, as Christelle says, where their pivot point might be. Probably, slightly different for everybody, right? But we're hoping they have that pivot. The necessity of students, and then this outside sort of revelation that there is evidence-based practice that we could bring to people, and that, gosh, as many of us researchers don't we want to lean on the research? Don't we want to know what works, rather than sort of going back to the well of, but I had this great instructor when I was a freshman in college, and so clearly that's the way I'm going to do it forever. So one of the things that sort of sticks out to me, right, is based on where we are in time, the tendency is to want to talk about COVID, but I don't want to lose all the stuff that you all did and had on the ground functioning prior to that moment, because I think it was such a beautiful foundation for then all the work you did in a moment of just utter panic for most institutions. So kind of in a nutshell, do you want to talk a little bit about sort of how faculty development or the ACUE course or any of those pieces were helping you sort of move the needle on your faculty, on what you were trying to do already to create this kind of culture of good teaching at Santa Clara?
Yeah, I think it's exactly as you said, right? There were so many different pieces that needed to come together, and so what we had, right? We had already this culture of communicating with each other about teaching strategies and sharing best practices. We also had a very strong sort of technology unit that was critical to helping to get faculty on board with the technology that they needed and provide the support that they needed for that. And we also had this recognition that those two things have to work together, right? I'll never forget early on getting a phone call or an email from someone in academic technology to say, can you make sure that what we're setting up is aligned with what ACUE sets up? Because you've been working with this faculty group that has been learning about best practices, all in the face-to-face classroom at the time, right? And we want to make sure that when we set up the technology workshops that so many of our faculty are going to need, we are aligned with those practices, right? And that was super early on. And I think that recognition that already we had laid the groundwork, allowed us to tap into that. While at the same time, right, we were having conversations, Eileen, before saying, how do we stop preaching to the already converted? How do we increase the number of people who come into these spaces and listen to this amazing work and share their strategies and share what didn't work, and sort of get involved in these conversations. And so we would have never wished for a pandemic to bring people into the space, but that is effectively what it did.
Yes, I think there was there was a space created, and we often, particularly between March and June, I think a lot of us who were involved in creating learning opportunities for our colleagues, or we could say survival opportunities for our colleagues, a lot of us walked around saying, what would we have done if this had happened 4 years ago? What would we have done? Because between the kind of critical mass of faculty who had been through the year-long program with ACUE, and then the existence of this structure, the Faculty Collaborative for Teaching Innovation, that drew on technology, assessment, and faculty development. And we all had created this partnership, and we had faculty like Christelle who were really committed to seeing the practices that emerged out of that partnership kind of infiltrate our campus. So those relationships and programs were crucial as we encountered this just unimaginable, speedy and challenging pivot to online.
Well, so I think this is the moment, right, to sort of talk through I think from my perspective, you all did a million things from March through June, just at the speed of light. But so I'm wondering, what are the ones that now maybe a little bit in retrospect stick out to you? What are the kinds of things that you now look back on and say, oh, right, here are the strategies that we put in place to really support, our faculty, but also our students, right, who were rocked just as much. And especially for you all, Santa Clara was an early, right, the region you all are in, felt to me like you all went online very quickly because the region was a hotspot. I mean, you didn't have as much time to think it through, I think, as many other people in the country would have had. So so sorry, I'm wondering what are the pillars of your response strategy that really speak to you now as you're looking at where your faculty and students are?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, I think we were, if there's anything lucky, and actually there are, right? There are lots of us nationally, or sort of internationally, globally, are walking around going, okay, where's the silver lining? And this is such a difficult year for all of us, and it hits us all unevenly, but it turns out there are some silver linings, some discoveries. And some of that does have to do with the structures that we had begun to put in place as COVID hit. So while our faculty were our colleagues, many of our colleagues, it was just a moment of sheer panic, like it was for everyone. And we're probably importantly on the quarter system. So And right, Kim, you're right. Lockdown happened really, a true lockdown happened for us really early because we were a hotspot in Santa Clara County. So our colleagues needed to get through what, Christelle, a few days, 2 days of teaching and exams at the end of spring quarter. And then we had, what felt like 7 minutes between winter quarter and the beginning of spring quarter. Did I say that wrong? I said that right. Okay. So end of winter quarter, COVID hit and we were locked down, I think. Yeah. And then we had just this very brief time. So anyway, our faculty were reasonably asking for tips and tools. Quick, give me what I need to survive. And that's utterly understandable. We knew as soon as possible, we wanted to move beyond tips and tricks and tech tools. And I think a lot back to that kind of the assumptions that lots of us in higher ed make about effective teaching. I think there was a sense of, okay, I just need the tech, quick, give me the tech. And I already know what I'm doing as an educator, so don't talk to me about that part. I'm going to take this cool stuff that I do in the classroom, which, in many cases is quite cool, and in some cases probably isn't in terms of student learning. And I'm going to just move that online and we'll be good. And then I think very quickly, we even folks who were convinced that that's all they needed, knew that they needed much more. So pillars, to stick to your question, Kim, you asked pillars. So we thought, all right, we want to take as much as we can from the ACUE program. We want to take as much as we can from our fantastic media services or academic technology unit. And we want that all to work together. And as Christelle had said, there was an initiative taken around that. We knew we wanted to have an integrated approach to this. And we knew that we wanted both the kind of outside source of ACUE, and we wanted our folks on campus with academic technology to work together. We also knew we wanted a follow-up piece. We wanted at the end of those experiences to be able to have communities of practice saying, how's it working? What are you doing? What more support do you need? So that's what we set up. We set up a program, we called it COOL, Creating Optimal Online Learning Experiences. And it had these 3 parts. The ACUE module on engaged learning, the media services academic technology piece of workshops where they were reinforcing the pedagogy. So again, not tips and tricks. They were offering tech tools that were embedded in the evidence-based teaching practices that they and we know work best. And then this third part, which was going to be faculty facilitated teaching circles or communities of practice. And those would be based in the disciplines, which is often a strongly felt need for faculty. What about how it works in STEM, how it works in engineering, how it works in English? We're very special. We're all very, very special. And we thought, okay, that's a strongly felt need for all of us. We love our disciplines. And so we thought, all right, we want to address that at the end. How is it implementing this in your neighborhood, in your disciplinary neighborhood? And then all throughout that, we had support. So we had tech mentors for those who were most intimidated by the tech piece. They had, one-to-one kind of contact and coaching from faculty and from tech people. Christelle did some really brilliant mentoring around technology. And we had the ACUE module that was facilitated by our experienced faculty, and there was this linear move from the module to the academic technology work to the circles. All of it infused with Santa Clara faculty presence and contact and support and encouragement. And what have I left out? What are the right answers, Christelle?
No, I think you've included all of the pieces. I think Embedded in that, but something I want to surface, is the fact that everyone who took the ACUE course was by definition now part of an online course, which I think is critical to being able to, see it from the student perspective. So not just everybody being thrown into that student mindset again, but now having to navigate learning something new in an online space. That's beautifully organized, and so you can see how easy it is to find information, and yet with all of that organization and thoughtful design and layout, people still struggle, and so that's where the facilitation comes in. And so I think there was a lot of learning from that process that then led to more empathy for our students, which is not to say that that wasn't there in the spring, but I think there was, because we're all so focused on our individual courses, there was a lack of recognition that our poor students were seeing 4 completely different online approaches, sometimes not so online, to teaching, right? And we're really struggling with that. And the not having a routine, on top of everything else that was going on socially. So I think that was really important. And Eileen, to her credit, was able to get funding for all of this to pay the faculty to do this. And I think that's really important. It wasn't, we're not rolling in gold, but I think it was important for the faculty to recognize that they were valued by the institution, that the efforts that they were going to have to take time in their summer for, which is not, usually that's time dedicated to research or whatever else you have going on in your summer, and seeing that, okay, we're gonna, we know that this is going to be hard, and we want to give you something for those efforts. So all of that, that's the sort of more details on top of those pillars, I think really helped to make it work. And how many did we have total? 400 is
we had about half of our faculty, about 50% of our faculty, 400, and we've just never seen numbers like that. And I think as we started to set the program up, we there was this, you don't know, right? It's a complete mystery. The world is sort of on fire. What are people going to do? Do they want this? Do they need motivation? No, because there's panic. But how do we really best support them, and will people respond? So we were delighted and a little bit, momentarily overwhelmed, but mostly we did little dances. We set up this registration form, and every couple of days, Kim, we were frequently in contact with you about hitting these milestones. Wow, we've got 100 people. That's so amazing. We've not had 100 different individuals at once. We have I think a great level of participation in faculty collaborative for teaching innovation activity and faculty development activity, but 100 at one time, at one, sort of in one program is unusual for us. And then we just kept hitting those milestones. And when we got to 400, it was really pretty stunning. That's about half of our faculty. So, and I do think it's all of the above, right? The motivation, the sense of urgency, the sense of commitment to students, which I think runs high at Santa Clara. So, and those two things, combine, the sense of kind of panic, as well as I'm used to doing a great job for my students. I'm really committed to my students. And as Christelle mentioned, they're in terrible circumstances. The students are in terrible circumstances. So how do we really care for them as whole people and continue to deliver on this promise that we've made to them as an institution, that we will really offer them a transformative experience? My goodness, how are we going to do that now? So I think there was real shared concern about that. I think the provost's commitment to understanding that this was a really heavy lift for faculty, as it continues to be, to provide that, material, also somewhat symbolic, compensation for our faculty was important. Yeah, so I think there's one thing I wanted to go back to, if I can, which is in the structure that we have addressed. One part that we left out is a part that our faculty who had been through ACUE helped us, including importantly Christelle, understand that we needed, which was the course design part. And quite frankly, our full faculty were not so interested in that. So we didn't say a lot about it. We set up a course the way that you do when you have objectives to meet, and you're going to set up the course in the way that it's going to best address the needs of the learners and how they're going to most effectively engage with the material. So initially there was, as people started to move into the course, there was real resistance. I do not want to talk about, we heard this back. The facilitators heard it. I heard it too. We don't need to talk about this first part. And we knew from our work with ACUE, it was crucial. And we knew from our conversations with our colleagues on campus, it was crucial. So it turned out that it just got rolled into these more obviously felt needs, ways to address these more obviously felt needs of technology and how to engage students with this key piece that addresses course design. We are now so delighted and so excited to know that 400 of our colleagues have had this rich, robust exposure to course design, to using learning objectives effectively, to aligning course activities and assignments with the actual learning objectives of the course. So that's another piece that is not quite a COVID piece, but is we have great good fortune, I guess, in that could be included in this this kind of roil of activity that occurred in the spring and summer.
I have to say, one of my real takeaways from thinking about all of the work that you all did is when I go and talk to other partner institutions, is one of these takeaways, which is, I think this course is wonderful and I can show you all the data sets that prove that it works for your students. But if you can hook it to things that are already extant, if you have other strategic initiatives, if that there are other programs that are really successful with faculty, right, it really changes, it sort of accelerates the leverage on your campus for teaching and learning if you can combine things together. I think sometimes we tend to just be like, the course is great, like go, but boy, have I learned a lot from watching how all of you to me, it looks very thoughtful and strategic and planned. I don't know what it felt like at the time, but I think we're starting to kind of see the benefits of putting together all of these things. And going back to one of Christelle's early points, the way that it then brought in all of these faculty who were not self-selectors or would not have been self-selectors in the before times, right, prior to COVID. And I know that you all were very sort of thoughtful and intentional about saying, we want all of these disciplines to kind of come in. We want to at least know that they are welcome. We would really love to see representation from them. But that's one of the things when I look at it, I say, oh, all the disciplines represented in the 400 are very different than the disciplines we would have seen in 2018 who chose to take the course. So I think there's a lot there that I'm still pulling out when I think about what you all have accomplished. As we sort of, move toward the end of our time, I want to ask for a quick sort of state of the Union of Santa Clara update. Are there things that you are seeing now that are good indicators to you of the efficacy of what you put in place over the summer? Yeah.
Well, I think one of the conversations that I heard that I think popped into my head first when you said this was actually a meeting of chairs across the entire College of Arts and Sciences. So that covers a lot of disciplines at Santa Clara. There was something said early in the fall, well, now that all of our faculty have taken ACUE, you know, like teaching online is going to be no problem and we can move on to dealing with other issues. So I was like, well, so I think there's a positive there, which is that sort of that recognition and recognition of its value. I think at the same time, there's been a lot more conversations about the work of teaching, right?
Mhm.
One of my least favorite statement is, oh, you know, she's a natural teacher. She's gifted in the classroom. Like, you know, you just waltz in and it all sort of falls together beautifully. And so I hope that that's something that people are recognizing is not specific to this moment, but is rather something that all gifted teachers do, right? They work at it and they reflect on what's happened and they change and they adapt and they meet their students where they are. I think those are the conversations that give me sort of the most hope. As hard as it is right now, and I'm not gonna lie, everybody's exhausted. But even in that exhaustion, everyone is recognizing that, you know, our students are not all in the same sort of capacity to learn, and how can we be flexible with them? How can we be flexible with ourselves, with our curriculum, so that they can still make progress in their education, right? And I think those are really, really important conversations that are rising right now.
Yeah, I think I would just add that, yeah, what we thought of as success, I think, shifted over the experience of COVID, and I think our commitment to compassion as part of our Jesuit identity has become a more realized foundation for faculty, for administrators, for students. That we have to start with, as Christelle said, with the actual experience of the students, and we have to think about student success, including what is more of a crisis than ever with student mental health. And I think we were so much more effectively prepared to address some of that than we might have been earlier, because of our this kind of teaching ecosystem that we had talked about. Because the spring was extraordinarily challenging, and summer was extraordinarily challenging.
I know we have, I think, maybe a minute and a half left, 2 minutes. But as much as I want to portray the fact that you all have it all figured out and have solved every problem in the universe, I did want to give you a couple of like maybe a tweet-sized length of time just to say sort of what you're still working on, or what your next sort of goal is after you've kind of come through this roil, as Eileen likes to call it.
I think we're trying to figure out how to sustain this. We're trying to figure out how to keep this level of engagement and innovation, and maybe have everyone sleep a little more too. So, I mean, I think we're thinking about, well, what are the structures now? We're going to have to, we're innovating again as we think about what are the structures now to keep everyone supported, and seen and understood, and ready to continue to flex with what is going to continue to be a real changing landscape in higher ed.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with that structures idea. I think we're rethinking existing structures, particularly around the evaluation of teaching.
Right.
You know, what does it mean to meet your students where they are? How do we quantify that, right? And give credit to the faculty who are being flexible and empathetic and reflective in their teaching. that's not really well established across higher ed, but there are great examples out there. And so we're in the process of really thinking about what can we bring in, how can we test it out, because again, teaching is like nothing we've ever seen before. And then how can we implement that into the structures of tenure and promotion on our campus, so it becomes sort of baked in.
That's right.
Well, I would happily talk to the two of you about this forever, but for the sake of the conference, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you both so much for all of your thoughtful attention to sort of laying this out. And really, it's not as if I can speak for your faculty or your students, but I will say it has been both inspiring, and I'm really grateful for all of the work that you have been in. It really has been a pleasure to be, I think of it as a front row seat to watching it all. So thank you for your time and for all of your work, and to everyone at AAC&U, thanks again.
Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, Kim, so much.